Hello and welcome to Dining with Death. This episode is on my playlist, Dining with the Deceased, where we visit locations that are supposedly haunted. Today I'm coming to you from Old Town Albuquerque, New Mexico, where the ghost of La Llorona is said to wander. I'm going to take you on a little tour of the area, and of course we're going to eat here. I'm Stacy Lee. Let's begin.
This is Old Town Albuquerque. It's nestled between the Sandia Mountains and ringed by three volcanoes known as the Three Sisters. The Rio Grande River has carved out this area over millions of years, and in later centuries, this became an area rich in farming communities. In the days of the Wild West, it became an outpost, a place for travelers and soldiers to seek shelter and rest as they journeyed between the small towns that began to pop up all over the southwestern desert. In 1706, Albuquerque was officially named as a village, long before the United States was formed. Over the decades, that village flew the flags of three nations: Spain, then Mexico, and finally the United States of America. Albuquerque became the stage for a violent and brutal conflict, and then finally the merger of two civilizations. It was, of course, inhabited by the Native Americans, who were at war with the settlers who were taking over their land. Later, during the Civil War, the Battle of Albuquerque took place here, with the Union taking the victory. Albuquerque is very much a melting pot. It's a place with different and unique cultures that all live side by side together. Many of the buildings here in Old Town were formed from the earth itself. Some of them are sculpted of mud brick, also known as adobe, with roofs suspended by large beams made of sugar pine lumber. As you walk the streets here, you are instantly transported to a different place in time. This is the very heart of the Southwest. This is one of the oldest settlements in America, dating back more than 300 years, and it is definitely one of the oldest settlements in the Southwest. In the heart of Old Town sits this stunning building. This is the San Felipe de Neri Church. It was built in 1793. There was a different structure here earlier on, but it collapsed, and in its place, this was built. Isn't it stunning? This is the oldest structure in Albuquerque, dating back to the Spanish colonial era. San Felipe de Neri is cruciform in plan. It has thick old adobe walls and large wooden beams called vigas. There are hand-carved wooden corbels dating back to the 18th century. Standing to the east of the church is the rectory. The rectory was first built in 1790, and it stood for 100 years. It was rebuilt in 1890 and remains today as it looked back then. To the west of the church is Sister Blandina Convent. It was built in 1881 and was the first two-story structure in Albuquerque. It was named after Blandina Segale, Sister Blandina, who helped oversee its construction. It was inhabited by nuns until the late 1970s and now serves as a parish. It holds daily mass with Eucharistic adoration the first Friday of every month. The grounds are spectacular, and you can feel the history as you walk them. It's quiet and peaceful, and you feel as though you've stepped back in time when you're here. For the more modern side of Old Town, the city has installed this beautiful entrance and fountain. It features Don Francisco Cuervo y Valdez atop his horse. Valdez is the founder of Albuquerque, and they've memorialized him well with this beautiful sculpture and fountain. This monument serves as a gateway into Old Town. There's a very clear division between Albuquerque and Old Town. There is no actual gate, but there may as well be. Old Town feels and looks very, very different from the rest of Albuquerque. As you walk the streets, it's really a mix of old and new. As you can see, there are a lot of very old adobe buildings, many of them with historic plaques on them, as they've been given historic designations and are protected, which I think is great. This plaque says this building has been here since 1706. It's just incredible. A lot of these structures have little awnings, porches for shade. I always think about the heat in these locations. I live in the heat, so that's always on my mind. Can you imagine living here in the 105-degree heat with no air conditioning? I'm sure any structure with a little bit of shade was a welcome sight. I love Mexican culture. I love the food. I love the music. I love the emphasis on the family. And I love the people. We had some Mexican neighbors for a while, and they had the best weekends. Every weekend, the whole family gathered together early on Saturday morning, and the cooking began. The music was playing, and the kids were running around in the yard, and the beer and the margaritas were flowing, and they just had the best time. One of the things that I love about Mexican culture is the colorful clothing and decorations, and you can really see that influence here in Old Town Albuquerque. Everything in Old Town is splashed with color. There are flowers and flags and iron sculptures, and the colors set against the earthen tones of the adobe buildings are simply gorgeous. There is a beauty to the Southwest that is unmatched. It isn't a tropical green garden. It isn't a Swiss Alp, but it is stunning here. I've always said, where I'm from, Southern Utah, it will ruin you on scenery forever. There are some things I really dislike about living in Utah, but the scenery is not one of them. The Southwest just has its own unique brand of beauty, and in my opinion, there is something sacred, something haunting about it here. There is a majesty to the Southwest that doesn't exist anywhere else, and there is a foreboding quality to it. This desert will kill you within a day or two if you're unsheltered and unprepared. You feel very, very small and very, very human in these locations. Nature rules the roost here, and she is on full display. There is nowhere like the southwestern United States. At the center of Old Town is this beautiful park, and in the center of that is this gazebo. We were here in the dead of summer. It was so hot, and so there weren't any events taking place at the time, but most of the year there are festivals and events and concerts here in the park, sometimes several times a week. The little gazebo often serves as a stage for bands and musicians, sometimes for speakers. The whole area has a very quaint, very ancient feel to it. If you were going to film a Western and needed a place that looks like it's from the Wild West, Old Town would serve very well for that backdrop. There are lots of little shops and galleries, and they are all so beautiful. Most of them sell paintings and pottery and jewelry, much of it turquoise made by Native Americans. There are also breweries and wineries and lots of places to eat. There's also this beautiful little center with shops around a small garden area that reminded me very much of a place called Ancestor Square in my hometown. I love spots like this. Isn't it peaceful and beautiful? And this wishing well fountain in the center is just the icing on the cake. In the Deadly Destinations episode we filmed here in Albuquerque about the West Mesa, I talked about how Albuquerque has its struggles, about how it feels like a city on the verge, perhaps a city low on funds, and how it's very much a city of the haves and the have-nots. But honestly, you don't feel or see any of that in Old Town. It almost feels as though you're on a movie set at times. It's very cozy and homey, and you can really feel the history here. But as we know, history always has its dark elements, and there is a very dark element that lives here in Old Town Albuquerque, and that element is the legend of La Llorona. La Llorona is a ghost story dating back to colonial times. The legend is deeply rooted in Mexican culture, and the story is told to children to frighten them into staying close to home, to discourage them from wandering off, especially if they live around lakes or bodies of water. The legend is so popular that each year a theatrical production of the story is produced and performed on the waterfront of the canals in Mexico. The production happens as part of the Day of the Dead festivities. There are different versions of this story, but the most common version goes like this. La Llorona was an indigenous woman. Sometimes she is a woman who had an affair and becomes pregnant. Sometimes she is driven mad with jealousy. But in every version of the story, La Llorona commits the most terrible act a mother can commit. In the most common version of the legend La Llorona, which means the weeping woman, she is abandoned by her wealthy Spanish husband. The woman, who is named Maria, was very beautiful and she was very spoiled. She had a nice home, she had pretty clothing to wear, but she was never satisfied. She felt she was better than everyone else and did not treat people well. When she finally meets the wealthy Spaniard she falls in love with, Maria did whatever it took to get him to marry her, and in her mind, that was playing hard to get. The man wanted beautiful Maria, but she knew that in order to truly win his heart, she had to make him chase her. He would come to her window at night and play the guitar. Maria refused to open the window. They would pass on the street, and Maria would not even glance his way. Finally, the man worked up the courage to ask Maria to marry him, and she said yes. Her parents were not happy. They told Maria, "He will not make a steady husband. He has a wandering eye." But she did not listen to her parents. Maria had 2 children with the wealthy man, but before long, he returned to his old ways. He would disappear for months at a time, and when he came home, it was not to see Maria, but to see their children. He would sit and play with the children for a while, and would then leave to go out to the bars to drink and gamble with his friends. Then something inside of Maria snapped. She was filled with rage and embarrassment and jealousy. She grabbed her 2 children by the arm and dragged them down to the river. In her fit of anger, she stood on the banks of the river, which was full from a recent storm, and she threw her 2 children into the waters. She stood and watched as they were taken away by the waves. As they disappeared downstream, Maria's anger began to subside and her mind became clearer. She realized what she had just done. She ran down the bank of the river, reaching out her arms and screaming for help, but there was nothing that could be done. Her children were long gone. In a panic, Maria ran further and further down the riverbank, screaming for more than an hour. She became exhausted, but still she followed the waters, hoping to catch sight of one of her children or both. As she ran, her foot caught on the root of a large tree. Maria tripped and fell forward and struck her head on a rock. She was dead. The next day, neighbors began looking all over town for Maria and her children, but no one could find them. Then someone came running from the river saying he had found Maria. The townspeople ran to the river's edge and found Maria on the riverbank, dead right where she had fallen. Not knowing what happened to the children, the villagers buried Maria and mourned her death. But the night she was buried, they heard something coming from the graveyard. At first, it was difficult to hear, but the sound grew louder and louder. It was a woman, wailing and crying and shouting, "Donde están mis hijos?" "Where are my children?" over and over and over again. The next night, it happened again. The villagers heard the wailing woman, and this time some of them saw her. She was dressed in a long, white flowing sheet, the way a body would be dressed for burial. Her ghostly apparition was moving through the trees, up and down along the riverbank, crying and wailing and shouting, "Donde están mis hijos?" "Where are my children?" over and over. For months and then years and then decades, the villagers watched as each night Maria rose from the grave to look for the children she had drowned. And as the years passed, people forgot her name was Maria. She came to be known only as La Llorona, the wailing woman. Soon the legend of La Llorona spread throughout Mexico and the southwestern U.S. Anywhere there is a river or a lake, she is said to rise and wander, forever looking for her lost children. Soon, reports of her along the banks of the Rio Grande near Albuquerque became a common event. People have reported seeing La Llorona in Old Town, and they have reported hearing her cries. It is said that after the stores and restaurants are closed and the tourists and shoppers have gone home, she appears, floating through the streets in her white sheet, crying and wailing, always searching. Now at night, ghost hunters walk the streets, hoping to catch a glimpse of the weeping woman, and there are even ghost tours put on by local event companies. People who enjoy all things spooky flock here to Old Town Albuquerque to retell the tale of La Llorona, the tale that was born so long ago. It is an age-old tale of jealousy and rejection, of anger and regret, and of loss. Themes that touch us all, no matter how much time has passed. As we walked the streets and the sun began to set, I thought about all of the travelers who have walked these same paths. I thought, as I always do, about what the people who built these buildings 300 years ago would think of me filming them with a tiny computer that fits in the palm of my hand, using it to capture images in a way they would see as witchcraft, and post them on an internet they could not even begin to comprehend. I think about what those people wore and what they ate, and I think about the fact that the story they were told as children is now being told to children of people who live in a futuristic world so different from their own. And I wonder if they're on the other side. Have they met La Llorona? Now, as we always do, we eat in our haunted location. This is Dining with Death. Today, of course, we are having Mexican food. This is Little Anita's Mexican food in the heart of Old Town Albuquerque. There are 6 locations here in Albuquerque, and it's a very popular place to eat. This Old Town location is the flagship location, and it's named after the founder's mother. The restaurant is 40 years old, and the menu is pretty much the same as it was back in the 1980s. They're known for their chips and salsa, and I can see why. Chips and salsa are kind of a religion in the Southwest. We had to have margaritas, that's like the law, right? And they were fantastic. Look at how beautiful these are, and I love the kitschy glasses they come in. Since I was drinking about 500 calories, I ordered the shrimp cocktail. Well, honestly, I ordered it because in places like this, the shrimp cocktails look like this. Isn't this amazing? You eat all the shrimp and then you've got a whole other meal in the glass. It's spicy tomato juice with diced squash and onions and avocado, and it's just one of my favorite things ever. Jason got his traditional platter of chili verde, rice and beans, and a chicken taco. I love places like this. They're somewhat Americanized, but the food is always so good. There's nothing like a traditional Mexican meal in a place like this. It's iconic. Albuquerque is a city of many cultures and many colors. It is a city full of American and Indigenous and Mexican history, and it is a city full of legends. Something tells me that as long as the city stands, La Llorona will walk its streets at night, and her legend will live on forever.
Thank you for joining me today on Dining with Death, Dining with the Deceased. Like the video if you liked the video, and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more from me. You can also join my Patreon, and there will be some bonus content there for you if you do. Stay safe and be kind to each other, and I'll see you next time on Dining with Death. Bye.